Hi there, Professor Cloud here, or Brian if you would prefer. One of the most exciting topics that's been going around the internet recently is an announcement that Microsoft, actually a number of announcements that Microsoft have been making around OpenAI. And as a cloud solution architect for Microsoft right now, one that focuses in data and AI, and one that focuses even more so on the packaged AI services or cognitive services as they're called, I thought it was important that I provide some overview and demonstrations of how OpenAI can be used. Now, this is based on the same conversations that I have with my own customers. However, not every customer has a dedicated CSI like me. So I thought it was important that I can provide the same kind of information that I would provide to you if you were one of my customers, but also talk about some of the responsibilities that you may want to think about when potentially leveraging not only the OpenAI package services, but any AI package service for that matter. Let's go ahead and jump on into the slide deck. Now, this will be the first of two videos. This video will just be focused on information and the slide deck. The second video will be more demonstration, and we'll take a look at how to actually use the potential models that are available in OpenAI. So first of all, what is artificial intelligence or AI? It is a field of computer science that seeks to create intelligent machines that can replicate or in some cases even exceed what humans are capable of doing. They are typically designed to replicate functions that humans find tedious or menial, things that are very, very repetitive, and then therefore can potentially be done faster using artificial intelligence. Now, within artificial intelligence, there is then a subset of AI that is called machine learning. And this is where data scientists come into play, where they are actually the ones that learn from existing data and improve upon that data, creating models that will be trained based on that data. So they're going to be writing these models using code like Python or Scala or Java, for example. Even R would be another example. Then within machine learning, these data scientists could potentially be learning or using a learning technique called neural networks, which are used to process data and make decisions, not just learn from the data patterns that are available, but potentially make decisions based off of those data patterns. And then where OpenAI comes into play is what's called generative AI. So instead of performing a function based on existing data and providing a simple response, such as a decision or a quick answer, it's now going to actually generate new data, new text, new images that are based on a simple prompt from a user. So think of the reverse. In a standard AI model, those AI models are going to use large amounts of text and provide a simple response. In a generative AI model, you're going to start from a simple piece of text and generate a large amount of data. Now, what exactly is OpenAI? OpenAI is actually an AI research and deployment company that Microsoft have partnered with over the last couple of years to help create these specific models that everyone are talking about, GPT being the most heavily talked about. They're a research and deployment company only, which means, yes, they can create these models, they can test these models and train these models to perform functions such as creating text and creating images, but they do not have the capacity or ability to make these models available in a production scale for an enterprise organization. That's where Microsoft's partnership comes into play. They take these interesting models that OpenAI have created and then productionize them. And I use that term very, very specifically because taking a model and making it scale, that's not necessarily productionizing it, because that doesn't mean that there's any security. It doesn't mean that there's any privacy involved. Things along those lines. There are no guardrails, for example, of how these models could potentially be used. In addition, they're not necessarily going to be designed to work inside of an enterprise. All of these models are trained on public data. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, when these models are made available inside of Microsoft, specifically inside of Azure, they are deployed via a managed general availability. Now, what do I mean by that? For most services inside of Azure, if you create a subscription, and anybody can create a subscription with a credit card, and there are free trials also, you can very quickly spin up a brand new service and immediately start to use it. However, in a managed GA, there's an application process that the customer has to go through in order to validate that, one, they have valid use cases that they want to use these models for, but two, that there is availability for these customers to be used. These models are deployed in a much smaller subset of Azure regions than any other AI model out there. And we'll talk about why that is in a future slide. Now, there are two primary available models today, GPT models and Codex models. Both of these are focused on text. I will also talk about some image-based models, but they are only available in preview, which means you actually have to get specific permission from Microsoft to even access them, let alone use them in a production environment. Now, what is OpenAI working on? They are working on a number of things beyond the ones that Microsoft are making available. So yes, there are image-based ones, there are music-based ones, there's a robot, there's a number of different things that they're working on, but Microsoft are only bringing 3 distinct models to customers, as well as to their own applications, and we'll talk about that too. The 3 models are GPT, which everyone's heard about because of ChatGPT, Codex, which is a subset of GPT that focuses only on developer-related code, and then Dall-E, and this one focuses on images. And Microsoft is taking these 3 models and not just making them available to customers in either a general availability or preview format, but they are also leveraging them inside of their own applications as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. Here's some quick examples to think about as we're covering this for what each one of these can perform. So with GPT, a simple prompt would be write a tagline for an ice cream shop. Very simple advertisement. And the response is, we serve up smiles with every scoop. I'm not a marketing person. I probably could not have come up with something that clever. This is a nice thing to have to help round out capabilities for an individual user or organization that maybe they don't currently have. On the Codex side, the developer side, you say, hey, look, here's a table with a specific set of columns. Write me a SQL query that will return all customers that are in the state of Texas with the name Jane. And it'll create the simple SQL query. Now, I've been writing SQL code for more than 20 years. I could have probably come up with that just as fast as the Codex model could have. But if you're not a developer, you've never written a SQL line of code in your life, this is extremely important to you or valuable to you. And then on the image side, which remember, Dall-E is currently in preview, it's not generally available yet, you can say, give me a white Siamese cat, and it gives you an image of a white Siamese cat. I'm not a graphics person. This is extremely valuable to me, and I'll give you even more reasons why it's valuable to me in a little while. Now, within the scope of Microsoft, the first thing that everyone knows about or should know about is Azure. Azure is the cloud. Everything that Microsoft makes available sits on top of that in some way, shape, or form, with the exception of Windows, of course. Windows sits on your desktop or laptop. But from an enterprise application perspective, service perspective, capability perspective, everything starts from Azure and then goes up. So in the consumer case, the user case, there's Microsoft 365, which is Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. On the enterprise user side, there are CRM systems or customer relationship management systems. There are payroll systems. There are finance systems. These all fall under Microsoft Dynamics. And then, of course, there are some partner solutions. Now, if you are building new applications as a user, not writing code, but using low or no code or building reports, the Power Platform comes into play. Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. All of these things can and will take advantage of AI. So Microsoft just recently announced, for example, that Microsoft 365 Outlook is going to have GPT built into it. So is PowerPoint. So is Word. So is Excel. So you're going to be able to get information or generate text for a Word document that you're writing or for an email that you need to write and have GPT provide that information to you. The Power Platform will allow you to, and by the way, one of the demonstrations I'm going to show you is actually built on Power Apps, will allow you to create and connect to AI models and leverage them right directly within your app without having to even worry about the underlying code that's used to connect to it. There are also services inside of Azure that take one-to-many of the different AI capabilities and combine them together to provide one set of functionality. So a bot service, for example, you could build your own chat bot for your own company that provides multiple capabilities, with one of them being that codex function that I just showed you a little while ago, or the Dall-E function that is able to produce a specific image. But then it also has maybe a search capability against your own database, or a search capability against your own document store, all other kinds of things. The bot service is a culmination of multiple AI capabilities. And all of those other items in that third row are also references to that. I'm actually going to do a future video series on cognitive search, as this is another area of experience for me. I'm also going to do one on Form Recognizer. Form Recognizer is actually a culmination of a couple of different services, including OCR coming out of image, but then also keyword extraction from the language service. So it actually brings those two capabilities together under one function. And you get the idea. Then we have the actual low-level AI models. They are all grouped together because there's a large list of them. There are about 6 different vision services. There are 2 or 3 different speech services. These are based on audio files primarily, or flipping back and forth between audio and text. There are about 8 or 9 different language services. Then there are decision-making services, and then OpenAI. And OpenAI is the first, as I talked about earlier, generative-based AI services that Microsoft provides. And each one of those 3 models are going to be available to customers to leverage in their own enterprise. And then if you ever need anything custom that doesn't fall into any one of those categories, that's where Azure Machine Learning comes into play, and your data scientists can create their own models. Now, for each of these 3 models, GPT, Codex, and Dall-E, they can be deployed within your own Azure subscription. They can be secured by you. They can be accessed only by you and tied to your data sets and applications. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? If you go to the OpenAI website, openai.org, I believe is the correct URL, you can absolutely play around with ChatGPT or one of these 3 models. You can test them out, see what they're capable of. But number 1, they are a public endpoint. There is no access or authorization. The only security is SSL. And those particular implementations are all trained on public data. They have no knowledge of your data, no knowledge of your industry, your specific terminology, or anything like that, other than what's available in the public internet. And as of this minute, those models are deployed on data up through 2021, which means they're a year and a half old. So, by deploying into your own subscription, you're going to have the capability to, 1, make sure that only the endpoints are available to you and your organization, that they are only trained on your data, and that only your users will be able to access them, or your applications will be able to access them. And those are just some very simple examples. And I have these kinds of conversations with my customers. I just had one last week with a customer where the only topic that we covered was the security and privacy of how these services would be used in their environment. As I mentioned, they are all pre-trained on public data, which means they are very large models. They run on a very different style of compute than the other sets of cognitive services that I showed you in the previous slide. And therefore, they are also much more limited in availability within Azure. They are only available in 3 distinct regions as of today. Now, Microsoft certainly plans to grow that number, but again, because they are running on a different style of compute, it is going to be much more highly driven by customer demand than any other cognitive service that Microsoft has today. You do have, with all of these models, the ability to train them using your own data. I hinted at it earlier. You can leverage your own keyword sets, your own terminology, your own coding standards with respect to codecs, things like that, in order to teach these models to be better for your specific organizational requirements. They do have built-in responsible AI to detect and mitigate harmful use. However, these are brand new. They've only been out 3 or 4 months. They have not seen everything. And as I said, they've only been trained on data up through 2021. So anything that happened after that, they're not necessarily going to know is harmful. So Microsoft is and will continue to update these models as new problems are found. And they have already proven at least 2 or 3 times that I'm aware of that they will do this within a 24-hour, a very quick turnaround. They do have enterprise-grade security with role-based access control and the ability to connect directly to a private network, thereby really focusing and isolating these services within your organization, not relying on a public endpoint. These are generative pre-trained transformer models, GPT. That's what it stands for. 170 billion parameter autoregressive language model that uses deep learning to produce human-like text, creation of emails, creation of summarizations of text, things along those lines. They're pre-trained on a large text corpus of internet and books, as I mentioned, up through 2021. Works by predicting the most likely next word based on the prompt that the user enters. And then it's a text in, text out interface. And I'm going to show you in another video a demonstration of how this works. And as I mentioned, the models can be fine-tuned for your specific tasks and your specific data sets. Now, Codex is a subset of GPT because GPT is based on all text. So take that and only focus it on code. So looking at anything that's publicly available in GitHub, for example, or things that are available in the public version of Stack Overflow. It makes APIs more accessible. It accelerates software development and widens who can code. Because now you don't necessarily need to know a specific language. You can ask Codex to create it for you. Now that's great if Codex is always right. It's not always going to be right, but it's great if it does do that. Now, before we keep going with Codex, one thing that I want to talk about with respect to both GPT and Codex, and I apologize, I meant to remove the number 3 on this slide. GPT now has 3 distinct versions that are available for customers, 3, 3.5, and 4. 3 is the most commonly used today. 4 is still in preview, and 3.5 is only available on very specific models. Now, one thing to talk about with respect to this, you're seeing both the 2 tags of GPT and Codex, but then you're also seeing a bunch of names. The models that OpenAI are providing have available feature sets that require different levels of function of the model. So they actually have tiers. So if you look at GPT, there are 4 tiers: Ada, Babbage, Fury, and then DaVinci. With DaVinci being the highest tier and able to perform all functions of its own as well as those down below. So if you just want to do simple classification, parsing and formatting of text, Ada will be perfectly fine, and it will deliver you what you need at the lowest price point, because as you go up the tiers, so goes the cost. And then as you can see, Babbage provides semantic search ranking, as well as moderately complex classifications. Fury will answer questions and provide more complex, nuanced classifications. And then DaVinci provides summarization and will actually create content for you. So DaVinci is what Microsoft is using with Microsoft 365, for example, for you to be able to generate brand new email content or things along those lines. I'm going to demonstrate in my own how to do summarization of content, and that is also running off of DaVinci. You would not be able to do that using one of the lower tiers. Same thing then is true with Codex, but Codex only has two different tiers, Cushman and DaVinci. Each one of them providing pretty much the same capability, but one's going to be faster. One's also not going to be able to provide as complex responses as DaVinci will. And by the way, this is the standard operating model for how OpenAI are leveraged, and you're going to see the same thing as new OpenAI models come out. Now, with Codex, I wanted to dive into this a little bit more deeply. They are derived from base models and trained on both natural language as well as code. Billions of lines of code. Again, public-facing code. So, as I mentioned, code from GitHub, code from Stack Overflow, and many other sources, I'm sure. Supports multiple programming languages. You can see the entire list there. I'm not going to read them all off to you. They provide multiple tasks, knowledge searching, auto-completion functions. Some standard use cases are the one that I showed you a few slides ago, natural language to code. Write me a Java function that will do X. Documenting of code. Say, here is all of my code. Create all of the necessary commenting. That's where, and I talked about this a little earlier, training this model with your own coding standards, it will learn from your existing comment and go, okay, I'm going to create a standard type of commenting for all new code that comes through my model. Refactoring of code. Very, very common, and let me tell you, as someone who's been writing code since the age of 9, a very tedious use case. The reverse, code to natural language. Can you tell me what this code does? Same kind of an idea as summarization of text. Give me a handwritten version of what this code base does. And then natural language to SQL. It looks at SQL a little bit differently. It doesn't look at it in the same way as, say, a C# function. It looks at it as the way SQL should absolutely be written, which is, hey, I'm trying to gather data from a location based on these filters or sorts or what have you. Now, the most common, if you've ever written code before, and everyone who uses coding coding development environments such as VS Code, Visual Studio, Eclipse, and so on, one of the most common things that you will see is autocomplete. I've been using it for years, but it wasn't necessarily from the Codex model. Microsoft made it possible inside of their development environments locally. Well, now it's being made available as a service. So as you're seeing here in this little video, there were recommendations of code that you could just tab and it would auto-complete that text. That's a standard thing that you will see. Now, based on that commenting that you saw, after the comment was finished, there was also hey, here's a recommended actual code based on the definition of the function, the text. There's the exact for loop that would be used. That's Python code, by the way. So there's a lot of capabilities from a Codex perspective. And one thing I do want to talk about with this, Microsoft does provide and use Codex live today. Keep in mind, Microsoft bought GitHub a number of years ago. Inside of one of the new capabilities inside of GitHub is a thing called GitHub Copilot. And Copilot is using Codex behind the scenes to perform all of its capabilities as a service. Now, I didn't want to not mention Dall-E, because although Dall-E is something that a lot of people will talk about, it is not generally available. You do have to get special permission to leverage it. It isn't available in preview, though. It does generative image creation. So it generates an infinite number of images with very simple text prompts. And I showed you the white Siamese cat at the beginning. It accelerates designs or inspires creative decisions, builds capability into enterprise applications through an API and SDK, just like all of the others do. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind, though, with Dall-E. And this is where my own personal experience comes into play here. On the side, in my spare time, I'm a content creator. I do a lot of live streaming, gaming content. I'm creating videos for my own Azure YouTube channel. Some of that contains images. Some of it contains video. But it's all my creation. If that information is publicly available, such as on a YouTube channel, then the Dall-E model could be trained on my content, which means that it could take information from my content and use in its own creation. Something to keep in mind, especially more so for images than for video. It's going to be a lot harder for video to perform, but with images in particular, people are already finding that their creations, their images that they designed, are being used in AI models. So it's just definitely something to keep in mind moving forward. This, like Codex being used in GitHub Copilot, GPT being used in Outlook, Microsoft is also using Dall-E 2 in a new product that was just made available earlier this week. Today is April the 9th. It was made available. I got an email, I believe it was on Thursday. And that is a product called Designer. And the entire function of Designer is to make the creation of new image content available to dummies like me. I'm not a graphic designer. I always have to hire others to build new logos or banners or things like that for me. Now I can actually use Designer to do the same, and I'll be showing that to you in a demonstration in the next video. So let's go ahead and wrap up this overview. And then, as I said, in the next video, we're going to take a look at a Power App that I created to show off all of the features of GPT and Codex. And then we'll take a look at Designer and how it can be used with Dall-E behind the scenes to create new images. So as a wrap up, I just wanted to give you some more information about me. Here are some of my socials, my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn profile, as well as the URL to my website that has all of my blogs and video postings on there for Azure. It also, though, has information about one of my big passions, which is gaming. I do a lot of live game streams, and there are both of my YouTube channels as well, one for Azure and one for gaming. And as always, with any YouTube content, if you do like this, please make sure to hit the like button. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button. It definitely helps me out. It helps out with the algorithms, and hopefully I'll get found more often that way. But keep in mind that we've got another video coming, and that one's going to demonstrate how these OpenAI models can be used for your own purposes. Hopefully I'll see you in that video next time. Talk to you soon.